Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into the story of one of the most widespread and controversial habits on the entire planet, smoking.
Get this. Right now, more than 1.1 times billion people on this planet are smokers. That is just a mind-boggling number. We're talking about nearly a third of all adults in the world. This isn't just a habit, it's a truly global phenomenon.
So that just begs the question, right? How on earth did one single plant, something that started out in ancient spiritual rituals, manage to spark a worldwide addiction and, let's be honest, one of the biggest public health disasters we've ever seen? All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with its history, then get into the science of why it's so addictive, face the health crisis it caused, look at the global war on tobacco, and finally, ask what the future holds. Okay, first up, the history. And to really get this story, we have to go way, way back. I'm talking thousands of years ago in the Americas, long before anyone had even heard of a cigarette. Back then, tobacco was something else entirely.
So for millennia, this was a sacred plant. Shamans used it in ceremonies to connect with the spirit world, but then everything changed. European explorers show up in the 1500s, bring it back across the ocean, and its whole purpose gets flipped on its head. Suddenly, it's not about spirits, it's about money. By 1612, it's a full-blown cash crop. And then the real game changer, 1881. A machine gets invented that can churn out cigarettes like crazy. The stage was set for it to just take over the world.
And I mean, it was huge for the early American colonies. People started calling it brown gold. It wasn't just some crop, it was literally an economic lifeline. It pretty much saved the struggling Jamestown settlement from collapse and created this massive, relentless hunger for more land, which really fueled westward expansion. It was foundational to the economy of a brand new nation.
Okay, so that's how it spread. But why? What is it about this plant that makes it so incredibly hard to quit? Well, the answer isn't in the history books. It's in our brains.
The secret ingredient, the real hook, is a chemical called nicotine. Now, technically, it's an alkaloid, which is just a fancy way of saying it's a naturally occurring chemical from a plant. But this one is special. It's perfectly designed to target specific receptors in your brain and basically hijack your entire reward system.
And here's what's so wild about it. Smoking is an insanely efficient way to get that chemical to your brain. Just think about it. You inhale the smoke, and it hits your lungs. The surface area inside your lungs, it's about the size of a tennis court. All that surface area just soaks up the nicotine, shoots it into your bloodstream, and bam, it hits your brain in less than a second. That triggers a rush of dopamine, the feel-good chemical. It's this super fast, super powerful reward loop.
So here's the trap. A lot of smokers will tell you, oh, it calms me down, it relieves my stress. But here's the catch. That feeling of calm, it's not actually relaxation. It's just the cigarette satisfying the withdrawal symptoms, the irritability, the tension that the addiction created in the first place. So the cigarette becomes the solution to a problem that it's also causing. It's a perfect, vicious cycle.
For hundreds of years, people smoked without really knowing the true cost. It was just a thing people did. But then, in the 20th century, the science started to catch up. And what it found was absolutely horrifying.
Let's just let this sink in. Today, smoking is one of the top preventable causes of death in the world. We're talking more than 8 million people dying from it every single year. And get this, over 1 million of those people aren't even smokers. They're dying from exposure to secondhand smoke. And if you look at the long-term cost, well, it's just devastating. On average, a woman who smokes will lose 14 and a half years of her life. For a man, it's over 13 years. Think about that. That's more than a decade of your life just gone. Let's drill down on just one risk, lung cancer. If you're a man who smokes for his whole life, your chance of dying from lung cancer before you're 85 is a staggering 22.1%. Now compare that to a non-smoker, their risk is just over 1%. The difference is it's night and day. You can't argue with those numbers.
And here's the thing you have to remember. It's not just the nicotine that's the problem. The smoke itself is a toxic cocktail, literally thousands of chemicals, over 5,000 of them. And as you can see here, a lot of them are just brutal on our bodies. They directly attack our DNA, the instruction manual for our cells, and that damage is exactly how cancer gets started.
And the damage goes far beyond lung cancer, not by a long shot. We're talking heart attacks, strokes, a terrible lung disease called COPD. It's also strongly linked to type 2 diabetes, cancers of the mouth and throat,
even things you might not think of, like severe gum disease and losing your teeth. The impact is systemic. It hits the entire body.
So as this mountain of evidence just kept getting bigger and bigger, you just couldn't ignore it anymore. And that sparked a massive reaction. It really kicked off one of the biggest public health fights in modern history. The real turning point came in the mid-20th century. In 1950, a researcher named Richard Dole published this groundbreaking study showing a clear statistical link. Then, the big one, in 1964, the U.S. Surgeon General's report came out and made it official. That was basically the starting gun for decades of policy changes, ad campaigns, and huge lawsuits against the tobacco industry, all leading up to the world's first global public health treaty in 2005.
So, what's one of the most powerful weapons in this fight? It's simple. Taxes. Just make cigarettes more expensive. It's a surprisingly effective way to get people to quit, or better yet, never start, especially younger people. And as you can see right here, those taxes can vary a lot, even inside the same country.
And this chart really drives that point home. In a country like Australia, taxes make up well over half the total price of a single pack of cigarettes. That's not an accident. That is a deliberate policy choice by a government to say, you know what, public health is more important than tobacco profits.
Okay, so we've covered the history, the science, and the fight against it. But what about right now? In our final section, let's look at how the battle over smoking is evolving as we speak.
And there is some really good news here. All these global efforts, they're actually working. The World Health Organization is reporting that smoking rates are declining in many parts of the world. You look at countries in Southeast Asia, for example, they've made some incredible progress thanks to some really strong coordinated policies.
But, and this is a big but, the battle is nowhere near over. Even in those regions that are making the fastest progress, we're still talking about hundreds of millions of people who are smoking. The tobacco industry is still an incredibly powerful force, and the challenge continues, especially in developing nations where regulations might be weaker.
And that leaves us with a huge final question for today. Because while traditional cigarette smoking might be on the decline in some places, what about vaping? What about e-cigarettes? These new ways to get nicotine are absolutely exploding in popularity. So, are we really witnessing the end of smoking? Or is our thousands of years old relationship with nicotine simply entering a new, high-tech chapter? The story, it seems, is still being written.